Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Models Workshop After Hours, where we sit down, paint, model, and do all the fun stuff, and be your local painting group when, you can't have a local painting group because, we're all having to hide like Half-Life. So tonight it's just Jay and I, and we may have some other people join us later on in the evening. It all depends on whether or not they get unbusy. Yeji's like, I'm free on Saturday, and then all of a sudden she's like, I has company. So Jay's in the house, I'm in the house, and we're both working on models. So what is it that you are currently working on, Jay?
I actually found a custom decimator that I wanted to try and 3D print for my new Chaos Army for Warhammer 40,000. And it did not turn out very well.
Yeah, I am putting together, surprising, more freaking
Primaris.
More, or as some people on TikTok like to point out, Primaris. But anyway,
I think it's Primaris.
Like I had one person tell me it was Primaris, and then I've always pronounced it Primaris, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, are we seriously having Hermione moment here? It's not Wingardium Leviosa, it's Wingardium Leviosa. The guy laughed. He's like, at least you have a good sense of humor about it. I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Get mad? Because honestly, neither of us truly know how to fucking... Well, actually, all right. So I will say that there are people who have listened to the audiobooks because I was listening to some like 40K theory sites and some other lore stuff, and someone pronounced Gilliman's first name, and I'm like, there's no way in hell that's how it's pronounced. And then I heard a snippet off of a Black Library audiobook, and sure as shit, that's exactly how it's pronounced. I was like, really? Not
Roberto?
Yeah. I don't know why, but I had it stuck in my head that it was like Roberto Gilliman or something. Maybe it's just because Roberto Clemente or something, or maybe it's because I have a bad idea or a bad habit of skimming words versus like breaking them down. So there's plenty of times that shit will sound like, A in my head, but then when you finally hear it, I'm like, what word is that?
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think and that's the other thing with it. I mean, we're talking about a made-up universe here. Let's just be real about it. It's kind of, and with half of everything being the red word, it's going to be however your mind really thinks it's supposed to be pronounced.
Well, also, in my defense, Mr. Sandy Paper over there, in my defense, they're also English, and they pronounce words differently than us Yanks do. So
that's true as well. That's very true.
So maybe in America it's supposed to be pronounced this one way, but since it's the Brits that are controlling how it's, or that do all of the audio dramas, that could be why when they finally do it, it's like, that's not how it looks like.
Well, and you're probably not wrong there either.
Yeah, it's my excuse, and I am sticking with, and they're my Primaris Marines.
And a beautiful set that you have. A beautiful setup that you have. So give me a ball. Give all of us a ballpark. How many points do we think that we're up to at this point?
Well, seeing that I lied to myself and I went out and picked up 2 new units today, and I had a unit come in the mail that I ordered last week that was supposed to be my last unit. I could actually tell you exactly how much I had if my phone hadn't died. But I can tell you that last time I added, before the 3 new units I just purchased, I was up to 6,700 points or 6,740 points of Primaris Space Marines, and
all of your old Space Marines as well.
Well, I haven't even included those. Those are literally just the Primaris. But with the FAQ that just came out 2 days ago, I think it was now. Yeah, I think it was 2 days ago when the new FAQ, I think 3 of my units went up in point. So that being said, more than likely, it's probably
verging on the 7 to the 72, probably.
I'm
Good
pretty
guess.
sure because I bought a unit of eliminators today, which they actually went up in points. And I bought another one of the turret guns. It didn't go up in points. I just wanted a second one. And I finally got a Stormhawk Interceptor. I ordered one about a week ago, and it finally came in the mail. And none of those were included in the 6,700 and some odd points. So if between those three, I get 250 points, I have broken 7,000.
Well, I would say it's a pretty easy bet that you've probably broken 7,000. I think the Stormhawk Interceptor, if I remember right, I think the base points on it are like 250 to 300. So
the big Land Raider with wings is 310 points, and it's like one of the second most expensive vehicle, or the most expensive vehicle the Space Marine have.
Without going into the Imperial armor stuff.
Yeah, without
probably
going to Lords of War and stuff like that. Then that just goes ridiculous. There's some shit in there that's, I think a Thunderhawk is worth quite a penny. I'm actually putting together the last two Assault Interceptors, or what is it, Assault Incisors, out of my second Indomitus box set.
Very cool, man. Very cool.
So,
well, and I'm excited to see how this project comes along. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to see. And that was actually something I talked about for us to do on the show, was kind of collection building and why we collect the things we collect, and how to start collecting.
Yeah, and that is actually a big question on like how to get into a game. Now, we will be bringing up examples that are very specific to Warhammer 40K, because that's currently what we are playing right now. But honestly, what we talk about can be adapted to any of the different game systems that are out there for the most part. There's some things that you can do with GW, Games Workshop, that you can't do with other games just because the architecture isn't. But,
well, and I figured another one that we could easily touch base on, because we're both at least somewhat knowledgeable on it. Me, not nearly as much as you, but would be into Magic the Gathering.
Possibly, and that could be for a later episode. Like I've told the listeners, they get what they get, because right now there ain't a lot of news coming out. A lot of news that we'll talk about at least. But yeah, I think this episode will be a good one to talk about army building and everything else. Now, you're the newer player. So the question is, whenever you find... You got into 40K, what? You said 4 years ago?
Right about there.
So here's my question to you, and I'll share my story whenever you're done. What got you into playing 40K? What was the initial pull? Was it a friend? Did you read a book? Did you play Dawn of War?
None of the above, actually. I've been a gamer for many, many, many moons now, and I remember actually going into the game store when I was a Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh player and seeing the setups people had for Warhammer. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and then I saw the price tag on it and got sticker shocked and ran away.
Oh, so basically it was something that you've seen, didn't have the money for, but now that you've got grown-up money, you're like, hey, I can do this.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
fair enough.
Well,
fair
enough. And I am the type where I will submerge myself in a hobby deep enough that I will normally unload one hobby to start a new one. And that's basically what I did. I unloaded a bunch of different random card games and some other stuff and bought my way into Warhammer, for lack of a better term.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do. And my thing was, okay, so I got into Warhammer 40K, I believe it was May of 1996. And what happened was, and the reason I remember the day was, it was the month that the Viper jet bike was initially released. And the current sculpt, it's actually still the same sculpt that I got in. I think it has an accessory sprue now that it didn't back then. But what had happened was I'd picked up a Reaper life counter for Magic the Gathering back in 96, because that was my first fantasy-driven game. I've always played games. I played Nintendo. Don't laugh, but I was really big into cribbage, chess, any of the typical strategy games I really enjoyed. And I really enjoyed reading fantasy novels. Larry Elmore's art had drawn me into the Dragonlance novels when I was like 10 years old, and I really was hooked to that. So when a card game came out, Magic the Gathering, like many of us, I was totally drawn in by the art, the story, the lore, everything. Well, I had a life counter, and I'd seen a few people have theirs painted up, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I talked to my friend who played 40K, and I was like, hey, can you help me paint my model? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I did, and I come to realize that I really, really enjoyed painting. So even back then, it wasn't so much about the miniatures themselves. It was more about I enjoy painting and everything else. So I ended up getting into Eldar, and I played for a bit. Then I got into Space Marines, played a lot more. My heyday of playing was probably 3rd and 4th edition. I played a little bit in 5th, got out in 6th, and now I'm back in 9th. And so far, I can say that I really, truly enjoy the rules and the rule set because it has a lot that reminds me of 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and then from what I've seen, because I didn't really play, a lot of the stuff that they introduced in 7th and 8th fixed, like flyers and stuff like that, where they're not the get all end all. But that was what got me into it. And, you know, whenever I first got into doing this hobby, you know, so what was your first army? What did you get started in?
Space Marines Death Watch. For those that do not know, they are the special forces of the Space Marines. They are specifically chosen out of each chapter and legion to eradicate the Xenos threat, alien life. So I really dug the kind of the special forces look and aspects of them, and ultimately they are one of the most versatile armies in my opinion, and it's just in my opinion. So take that with a grain of salt. And they have what I consider one of the best models in the game, the Corvus Black Star.
I do like the Corvus. I really do like the Corvus.
It's a beautiful model. Beautiful model. And so that's where I got my start in it all, and I haven't really looked back.
So I can't even talk tonight. What I would suggest doing for me, like if you're, and this is what this episode is about, you know, what do you do to get into any miniature game? I would honestly say there's probably 3 things that you would look into if you want a tabletop war game. 1, look at what's being played in your area. Honestly and sadly, unless you're willing to put in a whole bunch of work and recruiting players and all of that other jazz, unless you're willing to do that, then you're going to have to basically join up with what's being played. So the most popular, biggest, I don't know how you want to phrase it, game that's out there is Warhammer 40K. They have the largest market share. You can usually, almost every shop that carries miniatures has Warhammer 40K players. So it's one of those things where you're kind of safe. And there's 2 things you can do in that aspect. You can go big or you can go small. And that's one thing you want to ask yourself. It's like, how much do I want to invest in this? And
I personally have kind of my own viewpoint on that. Because every new player that I've seen and talked to over the past couple years, and even as a new player myself, the first question is always, well, what army do I?
Well, here's before even what army to pick, I would honestly say look at what's going on and look at what games there are. If you have, let's say you want to get in on the small side of things for Warhammer 40K. Well, you have a couple options. You can go play Necromunda, which kind of ties into 40K in the lore, but the miniatures really don't. You can go with Kill Team, where the miniatures do wrap up into the game itself, and then you can use that as a jump-off point to build a larger army. You can do what I did to get back into 40K, and that is buy a couple of the starter kits, which are currently still out, and it's called Indomitus. Or you can just slowly start buying your army and realize that you're probably not going to really get to play a big game anytime, or a bigger game anytime soon. And that's kind of one thing you need to look at. Also, you have an option that I didn't have. Jay kind of did, but I didn't have growing up, and that is You can also do a tabletop war game in a box. And there's several companies that produce them, most famously, probably Cool Mini or Not. And also GW has several of these games too. And basically it's everything you need to play is in one handy dandy little box. And there might be expansions, there might not be expansions. But you buy these, you can paint them up, and you can invite your friend over, and that one box has everything you need. And that's kind of what Kill Team is, where you have one box and it's enough to, multiple people to play. And that way you can entice your friend into coming over and being like, hey, look, this game will only cost you nothing to get into. And that's kind of how you hook. And that'll be a topic for another show on how to build a play group, how to basically be the dealer for your local area. And, so that's 3 options right there. Start small, build, find starter kits, or just do the tabletop wargaming in a box.
Well, and the tabletop wargaming in a box, there are a number of really good options for that. I know right now they're selling Warhammer Space Marine Heroes, which is a war game in a box, similar to some of the Cool Mini or Not stuff, but it's definitely in GW and Games Workshop flavor. But they're selling that at Target right now for $25. Also, if you're the type where and I'm always one to talk about this, but if you're the type where you have kids that are wanting to play with dad or what have you, that's another very inexpensive way to let them have some models to play with and paint with you and everything else if you're not wanting to drop $50 on a box of Space Marines or what have you.
Right. Now, I think, honestly, the second most important part, once you've found your game, is choosing the army you want to play. And honestly, I'll say that's very subjective and could fall into, I'd say there's probably 3 major categories that a player will fall into, and then you have the player that wants to win no matter what. And at that point, they're that type of player, and they're going to want to build a min-max list, and they're going to buy exactly what they want to win. And if you're not,
they're out there, they are a very real thing in this game. So keep that in mind, folks, as you are going out into the world and building your play group and everything else. There are people out there that is why they play, and that's fine. I am not that guy. I don't think that Larry is really that guy either, but
no, I'm more of the next type that I'm going to talk
about. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. And that's what I think is honestly what drew me to this hobby the most, as there's a little something for everybody. So just kind of let them have their flavor and you keep your flavor.
All right. So now what I am the opposite of what I am in Magic. In Magic, I actually, with the exception of Commander, I play to win. So I'm a very spiky type person. But when it comes to Warhammer 40K, I'm very Johnny or even Timmy, which means I go after what I think. Like, I love the entire thing around the Primaris and the Eldar, which are my 2 main armies, and Tau, which I have a kill team of. So it's basically I'm building off of what I think is cool, what I like their lore, and honestly, that's what I would suggest doing, especially if you're just wanting to have fun with this game, is go out and find the army that speaks to you. Like, oh my goodness, I really like this lore, and this is who I want to play, because the lore talks to me. Do you like the Tau Empire, the Eldar Empire, Space Elves? Do you like the Space Marines? Are you more, for the elite of the elite? Do you want the Inquisition, which are even more elite? And there's almost an army for everyone. And I would suggest, if you're really thinking about wanting to get into a game like this, Warhammer, or any of the other games, go and talk to the players. For one, you'll get to learn whether or not the players are worth having it. Honestly, if you go and talk to a player and they kind of just blow you off, then maybe that's not a good play group. Now, don't take that one example as gospel, because you never know. he could be the true asshole. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe it's me. But yeah, no, not true. Actually, I'd try to help out anyone if I could, or at least tell them, hey, give me a minute. I need to do X, Y, Z. But the point is, do some research, do some legwork, talk to the players, ask them. It's like, hey, nowadays, especially with Warhammer 40K, you can pick an army and be like, hey, I want an army that does all vehicles. Guess what? They have armies that are all vehicles that you can play and play well. And there's actually more than one. You've got...
Admech can run all vehicles very easily. Orcs can run all vehicles very easily. Eldar can run all... I mean, there's a flavor for everybody.
Right, because now you don't have to... You're not stuck into a specific force organization chart. You can take special abilities, for lack of a better term, and make it where you can... what's the word I'm looking for here? You can make it where you take all fast attack. So you're all fast vehicle, and you're out there going, woo, boom, boom. Or you can... Sorry, I'm building a vehicle right now, and the way I cut it looks like he has fangs, and I was like, hold up, are those supposed to be there, or did I accidentally add? I totally accidentally added. Okay, so I need to... It does look kind of cool, but it won't fit together with the fangs front. Oddly cut sprue. But, it's one of those things, like, I picked the army that I thought looked the coolest, because remember, this is also painting, so when you're painting, 110%, it's a lot easier to paint an army that you like versus, oh, damn, I didn't have to cut the fangs off. It's a lot better to find an army that you're going to enjoy painting and you can bring to life, because that's all what this is about, is bringing your army to life and all that fun stuff.
Well, and I would suggest getting into it, or a reader at all, get into lore. There is a wealth of lore out there. Pick up any of the Black Library books or audiobooks. The old codexes are great for picking up the lore. I mean, there's lots of options there.
Oh, yeah. The Horus Heresy is really great if you're wanting to get into 40K. A lot of the other stories or other systems, sadly, don't have as good a lore as, say, 40K. They've been around the longest, and they're very established. And because of that, they have a full, a suite of authors that does their books for them. But once again, it's like, hey, almost everything has some story behind it. Look at the stuff that you like. See, like, hey, I'm really digging this army and the flavor of it, and how, this character and all of this jazz. Like, I picked, so I play the Primaris Marines, but I specifically picked the chapter I did, even though it's like it's literally the poster boy chapter of 40K. But I picked it because I like the characters in it. I love Calgar. He's actually probably the only one I picked this army. That, and there's so much stuff available for it. Like, you can fart and hit special stuff that you can buy for this army, which is not, versus having dredge everything up. But, just honestly, it's not bad, and it's not wrong to build an army based off of what you find cool and what you think looks. That is
the
absolutely
rule of cool is okay.
Yes, that is absolutely applicable in this. You can totally build an army based off of what you think looks cool, and you can convert the models. You can do all this stuff. I've seen some orc armies that have tons of different themes behind them, and you're just like, what the hell? How do you have this Scooby-Doo themed orc army? But they do, and it works, and it looks cooler than shit. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the third type of player that I'll bring up is the player that is building an army on the cheap. They're the ones who are trying to build an army for the least amount of money. And once again, that'll be a great topic for another show on how to build an army for cheap. But if you're trying to go new and everything else, build an army for cheap, then there are ways to do it. First off, eBay is your friend. Second off, you can start an army like Death Watch. It's a very low model count. If you're trying to go cheap, I wouldn't suggest orcs, because or Nids or those guys, because those are horde armies, and you buy, for what I spend $50 on a box, get 10 dudes, and those 10 dudes are like 180 points. Whereas NIDS, you'll spend $50 on a box, get 10 models, and that's like 60 points. Not even exaggerating.
Yeah.
And that's just how
Well,
it
that's
is.
actually because for the longest time I wanted to do an Imperial Guard army, and that's actually what scared me off on it was the financial investment of it. Because to do a 2,000 points, which 2,000 points is your typical game, for lack of a better term, typical
1,500
matchup.
1,500 to 2,000, but yeah.
Yep. But to build that, I was looking at having to spend close to $1,200, and that's a big financial investment for folks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ultimately didn't end up going that route. But as far as low model count armies kind of being an easy way in, I mean, there's a lot of good options out there. Imperial Knights, though they're not going to be the most competitive thing in the world, they'll still be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah,
Same
but
with Chaos Knights.
I will say that is not exactly, while the models look cooler and shit because they're big robots, I wouldn't say that one is a cheap one to get into, because I think the cheapest one you can get's like 100, but you only have like 3 models, if that.
And that's true. Custodes, though, the
Custodes are a good choice because it's
big gold Terminator armored, everything armored up, very low model count, and ultimately not a crazy paint job either.
Mm-mm. Now, one thing I will suggest as well is, if you're getting into model or armies, is look into the start collecting too. Especially if you're getting into 40K, they have these start collecting armies, and they're usually 90, though there are a couple that are 150. Those are usually the more specialized armies, but they, in recent years, are actually a really, really good value. At minimum, they're typically almost double like what's inside the box. There's usually almost double what the value is. So if you're paying 90, you're usually getting anywhere from $150 to $180 in that one box. And they also, in recent history, have made sure that they're good units. Like, they're actually at least somewhat
they're going to be
playable
your
units.
core units. Yes, absolutely.
Because Games Workshop didn't always do that. Sometimes.
Well, and the perfect example, and I would, as another kind of point to the start collecting boxes, I actually just picked up one for my new army, Chaos Space Marines, and it had 3 units that you cannot get anywhere else in any other box. It had the Obliterators, the Greater Possessed, and the Venom Crawler. Yeah, and then it also had your standard Chaos Space Marines.
Mm-hmm. And they're a great way to start. Or if you want to play, say, Space Marines or Necrons, if you can find the Indomitus box set, which is $200, but inside the $200 box, you get 2,000-point armies, and you also get a Warhammer 40K rulebook, and it's not a miniature version, it's a full-fledged rulebook, and it's supposed to be the limited edition cover, but honestly, I think I've seen more people with the Indomitus rulebook than the normal rulebook, because all the Space Marine players and my buddy have been buying multiples of them because they are that deal, and they have some pretty kick-ass units inside them. But if you do the start collecting, you can, buy your start collecting, and I think those are typically 700 to 1,000 points in them. I think. I could be wrong. I'm trying not to glue myself to my model and failing horribly.
I think the start collectings are typically right around 500 points.
Oh, is it 5? Okay. And that's a good warband.
Well, and not just that, but you got to think that's basically setting yourself up. So for $400 for any of these major armies, you have a tournament ready army. You have a match play game ready army right there. You buy 2 start collectings and 2 halves of the Indominus box. You're in $400, and there you go.
Actually, you can do it by just buying 2 halves of this box, because that's 2,000 points right there.
Not true. So yeah, you could be even cheaper than that into it.
And that's if you want to play Space Marines or Necrons. But the point is that there are plenty of options out there on starting cheap. And here's the thing, you have a good play group and you buy it just collecting and are like, hey, let's do a 500-point game, they shouldn't complain. No, they should be like, all right, cool, let's do a 500-point game. And, you'll build your army lists up and you'll get into it and you'll play and all that other. And so you can get going just off of start collecting, rule book plus $100. And I'm going to say right now that this game, compared to a lot of other games or a lot of other hobbies, now this doesn't go for people like myself, but this is a very cheap game to get into. Now, people are going to complain and they're going to say this game is super expensive, and it does look like that whenever you go, oh, you need 600 or 700, 800 points worth of models or dollars worth of models. But one, you don't. You don't need that many dollars. And two, you don't have to buy it all at once. If you don't want to play 5 or 2,000 point games, at the very start, you don't have to. And then also, unless you want to, once you build your army, as long as you're happy with it, you don't have to go out and buy more stuff. I was a Magic player, fairly competitive, and to stay up on the trends for Magic, I was dropping every 3 months, anywhere from $500 to a couple $1,000. Whereas if in the same amount of time for 1 3-month period, I could spend that money on Warhammer and have more than enough models and or armies than I'll need for years to come. As an example, my army now. I have more shit than I'll probably ever need, but I like having...
Well, and not just that, but the other reason and this is one of the big draws for me initially, was this is a hobby. It's not just a game.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of hobby. There's a lot of aspects to this game. It's not just, gameplay. That's just one small facet of this game. It is assembling stuff. It is taking the time to put stuff together, super neat, super nice, and then painting it. That's, there's competitions. There are people out there that play 40K, myself, who don't play. They paint. And their entire goal is to paint beautiful looking armies. And there's competitions for how well an army is painted. It's called the Golden Demon. And, you've got armies, you've got squads and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can do with it. And like I said, or like Jay brought up, there's a plethora of lore that's constantly being put out about this game. And yeah, they have a tendency of retconning stuff pretty fairly often. So if that bugs you, sorry. But they always try to keep things spicy and interesting, and they're not afraid to go back. Because here's the thing, the story is basically been done over a period of about 12,000. So the entire idea of the exact history is known. It's not that. It's a lot of rumors. It's a lot of whispering. Some stuff was right. Some stuff was wrong. And that's why that's one of the cool things about retconning. You'll hear something and you're like, oh, cool, but then they'll be like, well, okay, that wasn't the official history because, it was wrong because over 12,000 years, people have messed the story up. So, and there's just tons of books.
And that is one thing that I always find to me, I find it kind of humorous and I just like it. I just genuinely like it. None of the lore around the 40K universe is done in any kind of official manner, meaning your narrators for stories, your narrators for all of this lore typically are just some bystander on a planet. Every now and then you'll get it where they're talking about a Primarch, somebody that's actually got power, but normally it's just what they call iterators, which are historians, basically.
Yeah, and so that's another aspect of this game as well, is that you have the entire lore. So you can spend all of your effort on this game doing nothing but lore and never touching a model, and you could just be drawn up into the lore.
You are cutting out really bad, bud. Like really bad.
Yes, but on the recording it's not, because I'm recording on my side. So
okay.
You can get behind...
I can hear you now.
You can get behind the lore of everything and never touch anything else, is the point that I'm trying to get to. And yeah, so it's one of those things. That's why I like 40K. It's so wide and so many different aspects of it. If you like art, there's art. If you like painting, there's painting. If you like playing, there's playing. If you like reading, there's reading. So there's tons of other things that you can get into. And there's also the fantasy side of things, Age of Sigmar.
Which has all of its own lore and all of its own everything, just like the 40K universe has, which is, like I said, it's a big draw.
Now, there are downsides. We've been talking a lot of positives about Warhammer and Games Workshop. There are downsides to it. The models are expensive. They are pricey, but there's a reason why they're pricey. And I know people are going to disagree here, but these are some of the best looking miniatures out there, period. And these are all high-end injection molds that, they don't rush things typically. Now, yes, Finecast, that's its own little potatoes, and there's its own little story behind it, and I'm not mashing that damn tater. But maybe on a later episode, we'll go over the story of Finecast. But
well, and as a 3D printer and 3D modeler and everything else, I'll completely agree with you. For the most part, the stuff that you're going to be getting in the Indominus box or a Start Collecting box or anything that's in current production, I'll say it that way. The models are phenomenal. They absolutely are. They're easy to put together. They're very dynamic in the way they do things. They are phenomenal. And it would be hard. And that's why you're paying a premium for that, because it is a premium product. Go figure.
Yep. Now, we really have beat to death the entire Games Workshop. Now, I will say this as well. Another thing that's good about Games Workshop is that they have been around for a long time. So, and they've been showing really good profits in the last few. So it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about the company suddenly folding. I used to dabble in the stock market, and I was actually watching GW's stock, and it performs really well. So,
and even through the pandemic, which has been crazy on a lot of things and crazy for a lot of folks, they've still done really well. They've still continued to grow their brand and everything else.
Mm-hmm. I think they're for a lot of the gaming companies, because there's several of them that have shut down due to what the things going on in the world. Games Workshop has managed to keep their games alive. Oh, we were talking about downsides of Games Workshop. Okay, so every new edition, and this is a downside and a plus, every new edition they switch things up. You will, at times, find models that you own that are no longer legal. Maybe it's the weapons, which you can just swap out. Maybe I remember having to switch over hundreds of bases because they changed the base size. Dreadnoughts that had illegal weapon loadout, so we had to swap the arms around. But that, honestly, while it is annoying because you lose some of your favorite loadouts and your favorite things that you've been doing, does help to keep the game from getting stagnant.
No, absolutely.
They also like to, every time they put out a new edition or a new codex, codexes are so in a lot of games, 40K and others, you have the main rule book, which is everything to play the game. And then you have what are called codexes or army books, which have army-specific rules. Like I have the Space Marine Codex, which has all the rules for playing Space Marine. And just like Jay has a book that's the Codex for Death Watch, which is all the rules specifically for playing a Death Watch army. But what'll happen is when they release a new codex, they also have a tendency of making a whole bunch of new units too. And they also have a tendency of making those new units a little better than the old. And I understand why they do it. And they have to sell models to stay alive. So they have to give people a reason. Do you have to buy the models? No, you don't have to. Are you going to be slightly at a disadvantage if you don't? Slightly. They don't ever make the new models broken to the point where if you don't have them, you're not like. And there's armies out there.
Well, and I would even say that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and there's armies out there that just don't have much of a chance of winning, period, anyway. Like I said, you always have the min-maxers who are going to find the math hammer that's perfect, and, this is the absolute army list to take, and if I'm playing Tau, for an example, I'm just not going to win because of or I can play Tau, and I'm probably not going to win a bunch of games.
Well, and I would even say, and you can look through tournament reports and tournament lists and everything else, and at the end of the day, this is like any other tabletop game. It is all run with dice. So at the end of the day, you could just your dice can be blessed by the almighty gaming gods, and you just came out on top. And the other guy was running the perfect list with the brand new everything, and he was destined to win, and he just didn't. So keep that in mind. But I think more than anything else, the thing I always try and push as much as I can through new players is just have fun. Don't go into it thinking that you have to win to have fun, because you're not.
I remember one tournament I went to, and I don't like playing 40K tournaments. I really end up rushing, and it is staying fun. But one tournament I did go to, I built up as many Wraith Lords or Wraith Knight, not Wraith Knights, Wraith Guard as I could. And that was like 50 of them or 45 of them, I think. And that's what I played. Them and like one Farseer. Was the list any good? If I got in shooting range, it was pretty much game over at that point. But at the time, they only had a 12-inch shooting range, so it took a lot of slogging to get across the board. I effectively got my ass whooped. I will say that a lot of players, when I put it on the board, they were like, "What the hell?" And you know, and I don't think I won, but I had a lot of memorable moments during that tournament. So you know, sometimes just playing the goofy list is fun. Because one, you know, that the guy that got his ass, you know, that kicked everybody's ass, he probably won't remember much. But the dude that set down 45 Wraithguard when Wraithguard were $10 a piece and played him, he'll probably remember that for a hot minute. He's probably gonna be like, "What the hell is this shit?" So once again,
and it's as a new player, you're not going to remember every rule. You're not going to remember. I think the military has the saying of the only thing that'll ever go to plan is that the plan never goes as planned. So just have fun, laugh, make a friend, do whatever you need to do, but just have fun with it. Because, yeah, that's what it's all about. Don't be the angry kid in the back of the game shop.
I'm always a big proponent of Beer Hammer, which is basically just chilling with your buddies, playing, having soda pop, getting food, having fun, and, you know, that type of stuff. Versus,
well, and I think ultimately that's another big draw of it is, and we keep going back to like why we love this hobby so much. And I think that's kind of the title of the episode, I guess. But yeah, it's a great way of just being able to kind of sit back with your buddies, have a beer, relax, and play with army guys.
Mm-hmm. That's basically what it kind of breaks down to. It's like we're playing with toy soldiers. You know, this is the grown up version of Little Green Army Men. So, and there, I mean, you also do have armies that are like that too. Not Little Green Army Men per se, but Imperial Guard. So, in a nutshell, and you know, maybe this is too 40K centric for people to use for other armies or other games, but in a nutshell, to wrap this little segment up, and we'll probably quote unquote wrap up. To recap right now, and I'm sure we'll expand on it as well. One, figure out what type of player you are. Are you a spike and you just want to build armies to play? Then you already know what ask around for different resources. You can go and watch the battle reports. You did well. Not so much in ninth because there haven't been a lot of big tournaments, but you know, you can still look at the meta, what's working and what's not. But if you're the other type of player, when you have the three different options of am I the type of player who wants to play to win, or not play to win, but play to have fun? Am I the type of player who wants to play but I need to, or you know, somewhere in between? Then
well, and I would also throw out because I believe with ninth edition, I believe this to be even more true now than before, is there is also a somewhat lore-centric player out there now that I've seen kind of coming to the forefront because of the Conquest system. Is it Conquest?
There is...
I can't remember the name of the system.
I know what you're talking about.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and there isn't, like he was... what Jay is alluding to, there is a narrative-based story. So like you and like 5 or 6 friends could get into it, and you could do almost like a league, and your dudes level up as you go. And you can do different things like I know I saw one rule where if one of your guys gets wounded twice, you can actually put him in a dreadnought. And
that's
I got
cool.
I got a kid coming up here, but you can put him in a dreadnought, and you can play him as part of that league, and as long as he doesn't go over your points by doing it. And that's another thing. I completely forgot about that. If you and your buddies want to get together, and this is a cool thing because you can actually have experienced players who want to get into another army. Let's say I wanted to expand my Tau because I don't have a ton of them. Got a big one, but I don't have a ton of them. So I could use this as an excuse to be like, okay, I want to play this league and I'm going to play Tau and I'm going to utilize this to expand my army. And as we play this league, we buy more units, yada yada, and eventually the new players are able to get in slowly. The old players are able to expand into a new army. If they don't want to, they don't have to. They can legitimately just use their old stuff, but they're still able to play, and everyone is happy and everybody wins. I completely forgot about the narrative. And also, you can write your own damn league. People were doing leagues for the longest time until a couple years ago. Or not a couple years, but then all of a sudden GW stepped in and was like, "Hey, let's do a big, full summer event where it's all based on the War of Cadia or the Third War of Armageddon." And it was a huge event that lasted a couple years, and it was supposedly supposed to impact how 40K is. I think they'd already decided what was going on
in the actual in the fictional universe before.
Right. They already knew what they were going to do, even though they said that we would have an impact on the 40K universe by playing games and everything else. But it was still cool. It gave us a narrative reasons, and they were updating the story. It was in the White Dwarf, which is a 40K book, and everything else. That's part of the core rulebook now, is how to do is it an escalation league?
Yes.
So, on how to do an escalation league and how to run one between your play group. And that's another way to start off small and slowly grow over the course of a year or two. You don't have to.
And that's something else to keep in mind as you're kind of getting into this hobby and everything else. This is a time-consuming hobby. You have to think, for every box of Space Marines you go by, you then need to put them together, which for me, putting together a box of Space Marines will probably take me an hour or 2 hours. For Larry, it could be longer than that because he's more of a perfectionist. For some, it could be a 15-minute slap them together with some crazy glue and you're fine. But then after that, you've also got to paint them, which, again, same kind of process. For me, it's a handful of hours. Just kind of depends on how detailed I'm feeling that day. For Larry, because of the level of painting that he does and the level of painting I hope to eventually be able to do, that could be several hours tied up into single models. And for some, it could be slapping some spray paint on it, throwing a coat of wash over it, and calling it tabletop ready, which whatever you do is fine. Don't hold yourself to somebody else's standard. Hold yourself to your own. But just keep in mind that it's a time-consuming thing. So don't get frustrated or feel overwhelmed or anything like that as you're getting into it, because there is a lot to it. So just take your time with it and have fun.
And you can also establish rules like for your league and be like, hey, we're going to start at 500 points, but they have to be painted. And that way you paint as you're playing. Andrew came in. He needed help on one of his Gundam. As you're playing, you're also painting. So you're not doing like I did and have several $1,000 points in models just sitting there unpainted. Now I knew what I was getting myself into, kind of. But so
I mean, there's a plethora of options out there to get into it and find a play group and slowly start to build an army.
Yeah, so Jay's local to me, fairly local. So I could be like, hey, let's do an escalation league and we'll get a couple other players into it. But we're going to start on February 15th, but your initial army has to be painted. And that could be part of the rules. So, you can paint it to your standard and bada boom, bada bing. When it first starts, your first X number of models are painted. And then as it progresses, you can be like, all right, on this date, we're going to go to 2,000 or to 600 points. And that gives you that time to go and paint the unit, or hey, this unit changed. This dude got put in a dreadnought, so I need to go out, buy the dreadnought, and then paint it. And it's something that you can plan on. And then by time the league is over, you probably you're on your way to a sizable force to play big games. I know Jay said the typical game's 2,000 points, and they vary typically between 1,200 and 2,000. But there are games that you can get in, and there's multiple players, and you're playing at like 10, 15, 20,000 points aside.
Oh yeah. Which eventually we'll get there. We will get there. You will be there. I don't know, with how much time you typically put into painting and everything else, and how little time I put into painting, I might catch up to you eventually, Larry.
Oh no, I'm painting these on the cheap. I'm not going to do whole super high end. I'm just going to make it where they all match and they all look good, but not like competitive quality type stuff. I may actually end up doing a paint dip on them.
You'll have a couple that I know you will. You'll have a handful that I know you'll take some time with. I'm sure your Calgar, and whenever you eventually get Gilliman, you'll probably throw some real time into them.
Well, you always have those showcase models. Maybe something on a vehicle. One of the vehicles might look super nice. I'm building this thing, and it looks a lot. It's a lot smaller in real life than I was expecting it.
Oh, the Interceptor.
Yes, the Interceptor is smaller than I was expecting.
See, and I spent most of my night painting Gaslands cars, so I'm almost ready to paint something with a little bit more heft to it.
I hear you. Oh, all right. So I'm sure we'll come back to this because you will be like, hey, I just remembered this. But so another thing that Jay and I have been getting into, and we really need to sit down and play, is a game called Gasland. And we talked about it before.
Yes.
And Mike has been on the show, or Mike's been on the thing, and he's talked about it as well. And so I actually went out, I believe it was last week, if I remember correctly, or it was while I was on vacation. It might not have been exactly a weekend. And I found a flea market, and a dude had grab bags of Hot Wheel cars, like 5 to 8 cars in each. And some of them were beat up. It didn't really matter. We're stripping the paint off these anyways. But they were 89 cents for these grab bags. Plus, he had like individual still in wrapping cars, or new lister, I guess he called cars that were also available for like 70 something cents, I believe. So I picked up, I was a big spender, and I dropped about $9 and picked up, I think I picked up like almost 30 cars. So that was a nice find. I sent a message to Jay. I was like, look at this shit, man. I found the haul. I'm stupid. I should have, honestly, and I don't know why I didn't. I don't know why I just didn't pick up every single grab bag. I went through, and my philosophy was, since they were like 89 cents, if there was one vehicle in that grab bag that I liked, that I saw, I bought it. But I honestly don't know why I just didn't buy all of them, because
between Andrew and Sammy, Sammy has a small fleet of Gaslands cars now. I need to print out another sheet of weapons and everything for you and Andrew.
And from the way it sounds, yourself as well.
Yeah, my stock's actually running a little low right now.
And
I started up the Etsy shop, and I'm doing a giveaway on TikTok for a team of Gaslands cars, which they're turning out kind of fun. I'm doing a post-apocalyptic squad car right now that is all graffitied looking and says GSPD on it for Gaslands Police Department. And
nice.
I think it's kind of fun and tongue-in-cheek. Right.
And that's actually probably, if you're wanting to get into, like, I wouldn't say it's a war game specifically, but it's kind of it is a tabletop. It's a tabletop racing game. But if you're wanting to get into a game on the cheap, I honestly think that is probably one of the cheapest games that you can do, because you can kit bash almost all the weapons, or you can find someone who prints them out and buy them for, buy kits or buy them individually, or contact Jay. But the rule book is at full MSRP is $30. You can find it pretty easily everywhere for $20
to $25.
Right. And then the vehicles, you need 4 of them for a team, and you can find those for $1 a piece. If you buy them brand new from Walmart, you can find them for $1. So
And again, and I've said this on the podcast before, and I will preach this until the day I die. I'm actually a huge proponent of the system, but another one where if you have younger kids or even preteen kids, what have you, that want to get into some kind of tabletop with dad or mom or what have you, that is the best system for it.
Yeah.
Hands down, bar none.
It's a it's a great little system. It's very inexpensive to get into, and it's a lot of fun, and it's one of those that easily the entire family could get into. And you can also create a league around it too with your friends. It can honestly be another one of those beer and pretzel games. And by what I mean like that is you and your buddies get together either at the LGS or at your house or their house or whatever, and you sit down and you play a game for fun. And it's just another one of those games. You can set up a league around it, pretty easy. I think there's actually rules for that in the rule book as well. It's just a great little game.
Well, and it's very community centric, so it's designed to be a game that can be easily adapted, that can easily have house rules, for lack of a better term, thrown into it to make it fit whatever league or whatever style of play that you guys are wanting to have. Because I remember when the first version of the system came out, and I think that was 2002. 2005, something like that.
Yeah, and to put it in reference, the second edition I think just came out like a couple years ago. So this isn't a game that's highly evolving. This is a game that's very stable, and they really don't change a ton. It pretty much just stays the way it is. And like Jay said, it's a very it is one of those games that you can easily make a lot of house rules for, no problem. And honestly, I'd say it's one of those games that is almost designed to have like house rules and stuff like that for it. You don't like how it plays? Do it another way.
Well, and I didn't know where I was going to go with that. But yeah, super, super easy to pick up for pretty much people of any age. So yeah, definitely a big proponent of that. Check it out for sure.
Yeah, so
I think me and you are both getting to the point where we're both playing with our toy soldiers and losing focus.
No, it's the gaming fatigue, where we're actually forcing a topic versus the let's talk about stuff. So speaking of stuff, I'm back at work. That was fun. After being off for almost 2 weeks, going back to work. I mean, it was easier than being off for 3 months and then going back to work. That kind of sucked.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, it's going to suck when, next month I think it is. You get to get started back and whatnot.
Friday is when I go and take my final test. So we'll see how that all goes.
Holy crap.
Yeah, Friday's the big day.
Ooh.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.
Right? Damn,
but at this point, we've got a litter of Airedales coming, so I'm not quite sure. Oh, yeah, she is.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, she is.
I did not know that. Awesome.
We actually basically confirmed it to ourselves this week. This week's when we really started to kind of notice her getting a little more round.
Yeah, Jay has a couple Airedales, and they're absolutely just great dogs. I think I sold myself to your wife whenever I came over and was just automatically was like, oh, he's a good doggy.
And Doc likes shit. He's a good judge of character, so.
Yeah. One of them almost pierced my nose on accident. They were excited, and they came up, and one of their teeth got caught in my nose, of all things. That doesn't happen every day. And
I mean, not to you.
Well, yeah, true. But yeah, nose got caught in the Airedale's tooth, and I was like, ow. I'm like, is it bleeding? No? Okay, we're good then. Even if it was, it'd be like, hey, can I have a Band-Aid? Nah.
Big one.
And then he has a sassy-ass little corgi. Cute as a button, still sassy as.
Oh, it gets sassier by the day.
It's like you have another daughter all over again.
It is. She's a handful. More of a handful than my daughter is.
That's scary, actually. Oh, yeah, this week was pretty tame. No winter storms, nothing like that, which is nice. Knock on wood. It's So far, we've only had one real bad day, and even then, it wasn't horrible. It was very doable. So I was happy about that. Any day.
So are you back out on the road Monday then, or tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Last week was my short week, so this is my long week. So I get to do my cooking, more chicken and pork chops. Celebrated Kara's birthday. We're teasing her because this is her last year in the 30s. She turns 40 this upcoming year, and we're counting down. I told her we were gonna go get some construction paper and make the links like they do for Christmas, but have one for each day. She's like, "Screw that! I'll add to it." She would too. I'd come home one day, there'd be like 4,000 rings on this thing just wrapped all over the house. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I can see Ann coming over and help with crafts.
Probably. Oh, man. But, honestly, everything's going pretty good work-wise and all that jazz. I need to get a travel kilt. Travel kilt. A little too cold and breezy right now. A travel kit built up again. I've already got the stuff for it. I just actually need to get it put in, and so I can start taking. When the hell did I start saying all that jazz so many times? But that way I can start bringing models and maybe at least build them on the. Probably not paint them. Maybe eventually.
Yeah, I could see painting. I think it'd be a little tough in the cab. I don't know.
I actually have a fair decent amount of downtime, so I have the time if I needed to or wanted to actually sit down and paint. It's the problem is I airbrush a lot, so it would be difficult to airbrush. I have thought about seriously tapping, and I've talked about this on the older shows, tapping the airline into the air system of the semi, like with the passenger seat, the raise a lower, tap a airline, and they make T-kits, so it's not like I'm going to be duct taping, but they actually make kits, but tap it and run a hose to run my airbrush so I can actually airbrush in the truck.
Yeah, overspray would get really obnoxious, though. I think whoever you were riding with would probably kick your ass.
That would be Joe, and he also paints miniatures.
So, in other words, you guys would be fighting over the airbrush on your downtime. I see.
Not really. He's more traditional painting. I'm more of the airbrush guy. But no, what I'll probably do is when it comes down to picking out the details, like I've done the primary spraying on a model, like hit it with the base colors and maybe a little bit zenith highlighting and low lighting, pack those models up in... And
then do all your kind of fine detail brush work on the road.
Yeah. Like pick out the eye lenses, paint up the guns, maybe some of the chapter markers, stuff like that. Finish up, and make it in the course of a week. I finish up a unit or two. I'm magnetizing all my bases, so all I need is something that's metal that I can carry them in, and I don't have to worry about them getting damaged. So that's probably eventually what I'm going to do. And I have enough downtime, I could probably knock out a squad or so. Easy enough.
Sounds like a plan.
Mm-hmm. That's
I think I finally got my my paint scheme for my Chaos Marines / Death Guard, but not Death Guard, figured out. I think I finally fine-tuned it to the point where I'm happy with it.
You sent me the message like, I don't like this. I was like, well, don't use it then if you don't like it. I mean, it was too, you said the word yellow, and then all I could sit there is look at it and think like, oh, great, I've got Big Bird marching up the field now. Cool. Hey.
Cool.
All right, so the way Jay and I met is on TikTok. Everyone knows what that app is. And if you don't, basically it's short little 15-second to 1-minute videos. And there's actually, surprisingly, a pretty damn active 40K community and Gundam community on TikTok. So that's how he and I met. We were following each other, and I posted a video in front of the local gaming shop, and he recognized the local gaming shop and was like, hold up, you're in Indiana? Yeah, I was like, yeah, just outside of Muncie. And he's like, really? He's like, I'm just right down the road in this town. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're literally a half hour from each other. But we have and the reason I'm saying this is we have a mutual person that we follow, and he actually his name's Brock. He ended up catching COVID. So he's under quarantine, and for lack of a better term, and I think this is actually how we referred to it as, to celebrate or pass the time, maybe, whatever. He's decided to start doing Death Guard. And he was like, I'm not going to do the normal Death Guard. And he pointed out the colors that he was going to use, and they were all bright, like bright yellow, bright pink, bright blue, bright. They were very bright and pastel-y colors. And I was like, these things are going to look fucking horrible. They are going to look so bad. But hey, you know what? It's Nurgle, so it kind of fits in its own weird little way. But he did them, and these fucking things look way, way better than they should. Like, too good.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the hell are Death Guard? And these are the actual Death Guard models, bloated, blistery, Nurgle rot Death Guard models. And their pastel colors, they look like a bunch of Skittles.
Yeah.
And they look great. I was like, what the fuck, man? How do Death Guard, big rotted corpses, look good in pastel Easter color? These fuckers look like Easter eggs.
They do. But man, and that's where I kind of go back to the whole, like, to each their own rule of cool. Do what you think is going to look cool to you, and by God, somebody else in the world will dig it too. Because I dig it, man.
I did too.
I
thought it was dumb when I first heard it. I was like, this is silly, but it's his own stuff. It'll be very unique. And I was like, it's not going to work out. And then all of a sudden he did it, and I was like, damn, it worked out really well, really nicely too. Holy shit. So,
well, and see, I love so Larry kind of went into what type of player and collector and hobbyist he is, I should say. I am actually more of I'm a little spiky, and then I actually like building to the lore a lot. My spikiness, actually, that's kind of where my Death Watch came in. I came up with a plan that I thought would work really well on the tabletop for them and executed it. And I bought more than what I needed to even buy to be able to pull it off, and then did some really cool models on top and put it all together, and that's what that army is. So if I would ever actually go to a competition, that's probably what you would see me play. For my Chaos Space Marines, though, I am definitely leaning more lore-centric on it, which is more fun in my eyes.
I honestly think that building, especially Chaos, I think Chaos really lends itself well to a lore-centric army because it has a lot of really rich lore. Another friend of ours on TikTok, Wesley, he does a lot of lore videos, and he's really, really kind of made me. I've always wanted to do a Chaos army, and at first I was planning on doing a Night Lords army, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, nah, I don't think that's what. But I honestly think I'm going to end up doing an Alpha Legion army because I think Alpha Legion is suspect. As in, I don't think Alpha Legion is as traitorous as they say. I think they're more into their own thing. So while they do follow the rules of Chaos, I'm going to build them in such a way that they don't have so much of it. They're not really demonic, and they don't really use, because Alpha Legion, they always kind of do their own.
No, and that's ultimately similar to the aesthetic that I'm going for. I like the demon-y aspect of the Chaos Space Marines. I don't like the Nurgle aspect of it. I don't get behind the bloat and all that kind of stuff. That's not appealing to me. But the actual demonness of it all, I find very cool. So I'm actually, like I said, building a Chaos Space Marine army using all Death Guard colors and using a lot of 30K influences through models and things like that. And I'm going to call them my Death Guard. But yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm actually playing with my and I've got a paint question for you here in a minute because I don't know. But playing with I did a proxy for a Demon Prince that looks half demon, half Contemptor Dreadnought, and I just absolutely love it. He turned out so good.
I was actually meaning to ask you if that was on purpose.
Question. Yes. Yes.
Because I noticed that
Absolutely,
too.
yeah.
Like as soon as you said it, or whenever you sent me the picture, I was like, "That's very dreadnoughty." But I mean, hey, if that's what you want, that's cool. But damn, that looks a lot like a dreadnought. I figure it was on purpose.
It is a dreadnought with huge demon arms and a jetpack.
Yeah.
So painting question, because ultimately Models Workshop is supposed to be at least somewhat painting oriented. I've been using a Rust-Oleum spray for my Prime, which shouldn't really be all that big of a
That's actually
surprise.
That's what most Warhammer players, unless you're wanting to. So, okay, and you can ask your question as soon as I'm done on my little thing here. As far as like priming goes, Rust-Oleum is more than fine. It's actually what a lot of people use because it etches into plastic really well. It is a little finicky, but it's not as finicky as some of the stuff that's marketed as miniature primer. Now, one thing.
So it is.
She has found you.
Okay.
So the one point of GWE-ness that's really cool that they've done recently, and it's expensive. Don't get me wrong. I look at the price and I bulk. But I airbrush, so I cheat. And I don't have to buy the rattle can. But they do have spray base colors, and the base colors do match the stuff that comes out of the pot, which is really, really nice. That's actually not always been true. Back in the day, a lot of their spray paints, even though they were advertised as like blood red, would not match with the pot. The new stuff actually does. So, anyways, I derailed on a primer question or primer thought. What's your question?
All right, so I'm using and I'm kind of kicking myself for it at this point because of how rough it is coming out, but I'm actually using a white primer coat.
Suck.
I know. I should have done something other than white. But it's coming out very powdery and a little bit sticky.
That is an issue with the temperature. So are you priming outside or inside?
Garage, so outside, basically.
All right, so what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to soak the can in like hot water and also shake the ever-loving shit out of it before using it, because that powdery paint, all that stuff, it's all dealing with humidity and temperature. And what it is you're trying to spray it when it's too cold. Part of the reason I really got into the entire airbrushing, especially with primer, because rattle can be a fucking nightmare. If humidity is too high, it's going to screw up. If it's too cold, it's going to. If you don't shake it enough, it's annoying.
Well, and this is just another one of those moments of Jay needs to get himself an airbrush, but for the time being, my money is going towards more chaos models because, well, you know.
This is a point of Jay needs to buy a bottle of primer and bring his models over here and just spray them over here because, like, I don't.
Well,
my stuff's all set up now.
I'm going to bring a pot of good. See,
yeah.
Now I don't have an excuse not to.
So I actually got the airbrush hooked up. There is one small air leak I'm trying to track down, but the compressor's hooked up. It's running. I have it. The compressor, okay, for people who didn't see it, because this is on TikTok, I had the compressor on the floor, then I had this 25-foot long hose that runs up to another regulator, the little thing that shows air pressure and everything, and it's mounted to my wall at my airbrush center, and then it goes to a T that splits off into 3, and I have currently 2 hoses running to 2 separate airbrushes connected to it. So I can actually, what I do is I turn on this air compressor, and I just leave its regulator open to like 70 psi, and it goes to this one, and I adjust the one that's on the wall to what I want to spray at. And eventually what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drill a hole in the floor and drop the hose down through the hole and have the air compressor downstairs, so if it runs you shouldn't really be able to hear it. And so the air compressor will be in a completely different room downstairs, and the airbrush will be completely controlled up here. So I got that done, and I also I went out and purchased a magnetic bar. Best way I can describe it, it's a bar. It has magnets you mount it to a wall. A lot of people have seen them. They use them for knives and stuff. But I bought one of those, and it's mounted up, and the best part about it is I can actually hold the instruction book of what I am painting currently on the bar. Like that's what I have is instead of having the paper like in my way, it's attached to the bar and it's open so I can just reference it as I'm building. And also my tweezers are up there, my drills, my razor knives are all stuck to this magnetic bar. Absolutely. If you have a dedicated painting space, buy yourself a magnetic bar. Trust me.
Well, and something that when I told you I switched over from the whioe to the more kind of off greeny beige color that I'm going with now for them, part of the reason I tried that color out was the bulk buy that I did at the not so friendly local game store in between us that I ended up making a bunch of money off of, and I don't like the owner of it. But anyways,
I know which one you're talking
in that
about.
bulk buy, yeah.
Mr.
So
Hurstman.
in that, I got 6 pots of one color of paint, and it's I think it's Ushbadi Bones or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but regardless. So I've actually got 2 pots of paint that I'm going to put into your paint collection for when I need to base coat, because base coating this entire army in that is going to be a task. So yeah, you got that to look forward to too, buddy.
Okay, I will say this Interceptor's sprue layout is kind of there. It's kind of weird because it jumps around. So you have like one sprue that, okay, so you can build 2 different jets or vehicles out of this particular kit. And honestly, you look at them and you're kind of like, how? Because the vehicles don't share a lot. Even whenever it shows what parts are in common between the two, yeah, it's no. But so one sprue is completely the Bumblebee looking thing. And then the other sprue, there's one sprue that's completely used between both of them. And then there's another sprue, and this is kind of weird for GW because they don't normally do this. And then there's another sprue that is completely for the other jet, the Interceptor, the one I'm building. Yeah. So it's like one shared sprue and another one builds one vehicle, and then a shared sprue and another one builds the Interceptor. I'm curious why GW didn't do 2 sprues per box and sell it that way, but whatever. I'm not going to argue. And it's not like they didn't print different boxes for both of them, because they sure as shit did. And I learned later on, because we were hunting these down, and you were like, hey, my local gaming shop down the road from me has this other one. And I was looking, I was like, hold on a second. Holy hell, you can build both of them out of this one kit. This is very weird for GW. They don't normally do. It's normally they don't have the shared. It's just weird. Damn it, it's just weird. But then
it sounds like it's similar to the Rhino and the Razorback, where the Rhino sprue for a Space Marines Rhino comes in the box, and there it is, and it's your Rhino. And then a Razorback is just a second sprue that comes with it that they throw into a different box, and then it's a Razorback instead.
Right. And
sounds similar to that.
Yes and no. And GW could sell the Rhino as a base kit and then sell add-on kits too, like a Whirlwind add-on, because it's basically a top plate and a missile launcher, and the Razorback is a top plate and the Predator is a top plate, a cannon, and sometimes side spawns. And that's what they are when it comes to the Rhino chassis, the various Rhino chassis models that are out there, the 3 or 4 that's there. This kit is different though. It's literally one shared sprue between 2 separate vehicles, but in the box there's 3 sprues, and these are not small sprues. You saw the box that these come in. These sprues take up the entire damn box. So I have one entire large sprue of parts that I'm not going to use on this build at all. And if I built the other one, oh, dude, I've got jet engines on this thing. I've got weapons on this thing and I have a cockpit. I have a tech priest on this sprue. There's a ton of really awesome shit that's on here that it's going into the bit box. I'm just like, wow. It really stumps me that this is, like I said, this is very not normal for GW. Usually they don't do that. Normally it's like, but also if you ever look, the Rhino's like $35 or $40, and the Razorback is like $55. So they charge you for that extra stuff that you get. It's just it's the same reason why if I'm buying a Rhino, I buy a Chaos Rhino. Why? Because it has
Because
a
you get
full
the extra bits for free.
yeah, it has a full Rhino kit. And then I also, I mean, unless you have a shortage of slide decals that you absolutely need, but you get a full Rhino kit and a sprue of Chaos stuff, and it's the same price. And, you know, a couple extra there's, back in the day, so there used to be instructions on how to build the perfect kit box. And for kit bashers. And it was like, go buy go buy a box of Chaos Space Marine, a box of, and it was basically all these different boxes that you bought, and the only purpose of these boxes were to cut the parts off of them and put them in a bit box. And it was for people who did a lot of kit bashing conversions, all of this stuff that they would need to successfully be able to kit bash. And it was actually really good information. You put area of a model that didn't actually I thought it was one of the surfaces that was going to come in contact, so I went ahead and like put glue on it, and then it turns out nope, it absolutely did not need glue on it, so it's just this wide open plate of. But yeah, and it was like buy a thing of Chaos Warriors, buy a always make sure you buy the Chaos Land Raider and the Chaos Rhino because they have the same stuff in them, and you get an extra sprue of Chaos bits, and it was just some really cool shit. And, you know, if you followed the directions, you'd have tons of kit bashing stuff like for scenery and base and all that. The Kit Basher's Guide to the Galaxy.
That you weren't heading out tomorrow. Well, yeah. And now there's just 3D printers like me that just, I'd refuse. Well, I don't refuse to kit bash. I've done a couple kit bashes for my Death Watch, but at this point in time, I see something I don't like, so I either design something up or put a couple different designs together to make a Contemptor demon. We need to come up with a name for him. That's your next job, Larry.
Brutus.
Brutus the Contemptor demon?
Kind of like Brutus the Barber, Brutus the Contemptor demon.
I like it. I like it.
So too bad I'm leaving out tomorrow.
Oh, because I've actually got a run to Game Preserve South, because as I was saying earlier, I had this big ambition of getting into Imperial Guard, and quickly realized that it was more of a financial investment than I was wanting to make into the hobby at that exact point in time. And now I have to run down and sell some Imperial Guard stuff, but down to Game Preserve South, which I love that store. It was a great selection and very knowledgeable staff.
Nice. Yeah, like you said, I'm heading out and I have to do my I have to do my cooking tomorrow. So in keto news, I did not get to weigh in because my scale's dead and I haven't dug out the batteries. But at last weigh-in, I was down 36.2 pounds. So
very good job, bud. Very cool.
The weight is coming off. And I will say that this is actually during winter when I'm in my most inactive. It's where I go, it's too damn cold to do walks or anything. During the summer, I actually end up usually walking a mile or two every day. While I'm at my stops. Right now, a little too cold. It's that like cold, like breezy, fucking freeze your ass off cold. So
yeah.
So I'm proud that I'm actually still losing weight, even though I am in my hibernation inactive period.
No, good for you, man. Honestly, like I said, you've stuck to it. It's awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, and as of last, I actually ended up having to go out buy new pants. I went from, I was wearing 40s, but I probably really should have been in 42s. And now I'm in 38s, and they're actually kind of loose. So
nice. Very good, man.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very happy about that. My poor belt, not my poor belt, but I've had to drill another hole in my belt last week. It's actually now the tip of my belt actually ends on my hip bone now, over on my side. I've had to add like 5 notches to the belt, so I've probably lost close to 5 inches off my waist. I'm a skinny little fat ass. Yay!
All right. I feel like I had another topic I was wanting us to touch on with all of this collection building and all that kind of stuff, and now I'm spacing it.
Don't worry about it. Just talk. If it pops up, it pops up. If not, it's not like we're never going to do any more episodes. That's why I always carry a little notebook. They're handy because then you can take notes as to what do I want to talk about.
Oh, doing a second giveaway. I don't know if you caught that one or not.
I did
It's
happen
looking-
to look and see it. I voted on
It's
it
looking
too.
like this one is going to be a Warhammer giveaway. So that's where the vote is heavily leading towards. Wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit and see what you kind of thought would be a good giveaway for Warhammer. I thought about just doing a set amount of credits towards 3D printing stuff for folks. I also thought about just finding a generic model from one of my designs that I like and printing that up for somebody. What are your thoughts, bud?
I think honestly, either one would work out nicely. As someone who's has chapter emblems or who likes chapter emblems, I think credit honestly might not be a bad idea.
And that's kind of where I was leaning with it too.
That way you can actually
do one of
work with the person too. Maybe they want bases and be like, hey, or maybe they want stuff to go on bases, or maybe they need a special banner. Or they want some special helmets for their dude. Maybe they just want some conversion pieces.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. Maybe the credit is the way to do it. Because I thought about because I have a slight dreadnought fetish. If you haven't noticed, and any of the other people, if you follow me on TikTok or see any of the stuff I post anywhere else, I love dreadnoughts, and will print myself up custom dreadnoughts for different things. Like I've got 4 custom dreadnoughts for my Chaos Space Marines already, and I haven't even been working on that for 2 weeks yet, that army. So I've got kind of a thing there. So I thought about doing one of those up for somebody and kind of letting them have one of the things I love. But I don't think I'm going to end up doing any paint work on this one, just because everybody kind of has their own color scheme that they work with. So I don't think I'm going to end up painting it. But
yeah,
maybe the credit is the way to go.
You can't give away an entire chapter like on the Gaslands giveaway. He's for an entire team, which for that game is 4. So it was 4 fully decked out. So the money investment is not huge. While as 40K, you can't exactly do. We're giving a whole chapter type deal or a whole army. So
and I thought about going real big with it, and I think if my following becomes big enough, I might eventually do a giveaway for a start collecting box or something like that. But I don't think I'm to that point yet.
Nah.
Maybe I'll leave that for Wes Hammer or Derp or one of those guys.
And that might not be a bad idea as a community to get together and be like, hey, let's all chip in $20 and the 5 of us run one, and we can do the, hey, you gotta follow all 5 of them. So it's a way to grow more than just one and not have to eat the entire cost for one person.
That's not a bad idea either. But I think the credit towards the shop. That way, if they want some Warhammer stuff, they can get Warhammer. If they're a Star Wars Legion player, I'm sure I can find something Star Warsy and print something up for them, or whatever their taste is. Bless you.
Ooh, I think I got some plastic dust up the nose. They call it plastic crack for a reason.
Oh, that was the other thing. I'm actually going to do at least start 2 new segments in my TikTok, and I'm sure you kind of already seen one, though. Warhammer how-tos, where I'm going to kind of show the process of building a model, putting it through paint and everything else. I'm also going to start doing some mild tool reviews. The big one that I'm wanting to actually go on is I got a Dremel stylo for Christmas, and I've put more work through that thing. I mean, it has saved me hours and hours and hours of time. So I am very, very smitten with it.
Smitten like a kitten.
Well, and I do so much much like what Larry does. Well, kind of like what Larry does. I do a lot of magnet work. So on one of my dreadnoughts that I've got sitting in front of me, it's a Leviathan. He's a big brick of a dreadnought, but he's got 8 different arms. So for each one of those arms, I've put a magnet into the body of the dreadnought and then put a magnet on the arm so I could switch his loadout around and kind of have some fun with him and try different techniques and stuff like that. But just doing that and being able to file with that thing or even do some drill work with that thing versus doing it by hand, it is so much faster.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. I don't have a stylo. I have a full-fledged Dremel with the with the little attachment hangs down, so it's kind of like a stylo-ish looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually called the stylus. But yeah, I love it. I had the original version, the stylo. It was like a little gun-looking thing.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I love that thing, and I ended up misplacing it. Cannot find it, and they don't make them anymore. I guess it had some issues, but from what I've read from a whole bunch of people, loved it. Kind of don't know if they got rid of it. But yeah.
Poor little fella.
Yeah, I mean,
I actually completely covered the my downstairs painting station and kind of where I do a lot of my work on my models, covered it in plastic dust the other day. And the wife was not very pleased.
I did that with a Ford when I was doing work on a Forge World model. I covered the entire area and fucking just absolutely covered it in resin.
Well, and that's one thing that I will say with working with resin versus working with plastic, because they're two very different things to work with for anybody listening or those new modelers out there. In my personal opinion, while resin does have its setbacks and its negatives as far as working with it, it is so much easier than plastic. So much easier than plastic. It doesn't melt. It just sands very, very well.
Have to hold off making that particular magnet.
Get some magnets. I love magnets. Yeah, you asked me the other day if I needed any magnets because you were putting in a big order, and I was like, no, I'm good. And then actually sat down to start putting some stuff together and realized I was completely out of one of my magnet sizes and had to order it like 2 days later.
You should have said something. I haven't put my order in yet.
Well, I already ordered it. I ordered it like 2 days after you asked me. I just didn't even think it. But I just ordered it off of Amazon, man.
Oh, see, I actually order from a magnet store. Like a place that actually specializes because I want to know exactly what I'm getting, the exact power, and I want.
Well, and when I first got into the hobby and decided I was going to start magnetizing to the level that I do now, I bought a bunch of different sizes. I bought from a couple different companies and all through Amazon, but kind of picked the brand that seemed the most consistent for me and seemed to be like the best sizing for me, and kind of just narrowed it down to them. And I have had fantastic luck out of everything I've gotten off them at this point. So,
and if you don't want to play the guesswork like Jay did, you can just go and pick up magnets from K&J Magnetics. I've quite literally been using them for almost 2 decades.
Yeah, do what Larry says. It's probably easier.
I really do enjoy K&J Magnetics. Really good company.
I'll have to check them out next time I have to stock back up. I know I've got a couple sizes that I might need more of by the end of this project. So
they literally on their page have it listed out like this magnet has this amount of pull, so you can decide whether you need because they offer 3 different strengths. They offer N35, N42, and N52. And N52 is theoretically not theoretically the strongest magnet. It's practicality wise the strongest magnet. There is theorized a way of getting like an N62 magnet, but it's not feasible. Like you have to almost be in a super cold type situation for that type of shit. But and you can look and you can be like, okay, I need a 1/8 magnet by 1/8 because that's all I have the room for. And you can be like, well, the N42 has 0.19 pounds of pull, so that's not going to be strong enough. So I'm going to go to the N52 that has 0.26 pounds of pull. And it also gives you the stats if it's, and that's magnet to metal. They also give the stat for magnet to magnet as well. So, it might be 0.19 pounds of pull if it's only to metal, but it's 0.27 pounds of pull if it's to a magnet. So that's one reason I really like that website, is because they give the actual fucking scientific breakdown. So I can be like, I don't have to enter something unaware. I can be like, okay, I am going to put this arm, this arm weighs 2 ounces. Is that going to be enough pull, or do I need to move up to a different? So you can actually, you go into things a lot more educated by using their stuff, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Speaking of customization options, I did not actually tell you how your order through the printer came out. The heads, although one is missing and I don't know where it went, and I think I figured out which one it is, so I just need to reprint it for you. The heads turned out phenomenal. Very crisp, very clean.
Nice.
Ultimately, they look like intercessor heads, man. Like, they should work perfectly for what you're looking for. There's a handful of them that don't quite have that perfectly round bottom on them, so we might have a little bit of work to do there, but for the most part, they definitely look the part, and the U's on them are very crisp.
Sweet.
Your shoulder icons actually performed better than I would have thought they were going to. I thought they were going to be more of a hassle than they were, and they are paper thin. The only issue I foresee you having with them is getting them off their tiny little sprues and not tearing them. So you might have to, I don't know.
I has tools.
I know how.
I can figure it out.
Well, what I was going to say is, if it were me, I would probably, because they're all sitting, for the most part, there's a couple that have fallen off of their little platforms at this point, but I would probably suspend them in lukewarm water and pull them apart that way.
Okay.
Or for what I do, I typically use, I'll use lukewarm rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
Because that way it'll air dry fairly easily, so you're not having to worry about patting it dry or anything like that. See, your boy's got a couple tricks up his sleeve. Not many, but I got like 2.
You need to hoard that last one.
He won't ever hear about it. It's that twist move I do right at the end. But no, I surprised myself how well they turned out and how crisp and thin and everything else they are. I'm super excited.
Yeah, if you're gonna have an Ultramarine army, might as well have them fully fucking decked out.
Nah. And like I said, your Laurel helmets turned out really cool too. I'm actually eyeballing one of them right now, and I think the missing helmet is actually one of your captain's helmets, your big gladiatorial style helmets. I think one of those is missing, but you can even see the little U's on it. It is so cool. Super excited. Now I just need to figure out how to put my own army together. I'll actually get somewhere.
Yeah, so I did a couple videos on this, and I ended up picking up some debonder. For those that don't know, it basically dissolves the bond of super glue, because I like an idiot. So back in my day, you had one size base. It was a 25 millimeter. And it's scary because I look at 25 millimeter bases now and I'm like, damn, these are so tiny. How did we ever? But I accidentally glued a whole bunch of my models on 40 millimeter bases instead of 32 millimeter bases. So, yeah, so I ended up going out and buying a bottle of debonder. It's like $5 for a pretty good sized bottle. It's called Uncure debonder. It goes by other, multiple different, but I picked that up. And so I just basically soaked the base with them. And this is another reason I say super glue is better. I just dabbed it on the base and I let it sit for about 2 minutes and then pulled them right off. No problem. Just popped right off.
Well, that's actually a project that I've got. I've got one of my dreadnoughts on the wrong size base. I put them on a 60 mil base thinking that that's what it needed, and they actually needed an 80 mil base. So that's a project I'm going to have to go down to rebase one of my Deathwatch dreadnoughts eventually.
Yeah, well, next time you come in, we'll have to utilize a test piece of resin and see how the resin reacts with the debonder.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think it would be okay.
it should be. And if it is, then we'll just hit it with some debonder and we'll pop it right off the base.
Well, and that's part of the reason why for my basing and this is another one of those kind of things where I think there are certain aspects to the painting side of the hobby that I think I do better with than other aspects of it. I think ultimately my color theory is pretty good. I know how to make things accent well with other colors and things like that. But my basing, I think I'm actually pretty darn good at it. But part of the reason that I base the way I do is I make to pop off their bases. Not so easy that pushing around on a board's going to make something fall over, but with a little bit of scalpelage, I should be able to get him off without a big problem. So I think we'll be good either way. But yeah, so that's one of my projects coming up that I've got to do is first get a base made up for him and get him switched over, and then I've got to find another dreadnought to put on that base. It's going to be terrible.
Oh darn! You have to make another dreadnought.
I know. It's rough. I love dreadnoughts.
I'm trying to remember who is the dreadnought army. I think it's
Blood Angels have a lot.
like there used to be an army that you could effectively build nothing but like
Iron Hands. Iron Hands have a lot of dreadnoughts.
Okay.
Because they're the whole ones where they believe that replacing their biological systems with mechanical systems makes them stronger and better and all those other things. So they think being a dreadnought is the be all and end all in life. So I think, if I remember right, they've got a lot of dreadnoughts in their army.
Well, I was talking. Sorry, I was flipping the page. I was actually talking to play. Like they have.
Oh.
Like there used to be the Dreadnought Army, and I want to say it was either Blood Angels, possibly Blood Angels or Dark Angels. I think it was Blood Angels. I think you could play like almost an entire army of nothing but dreadnoughts. It was Blood Angels because I remember they ended up doing a special rule where you had a Death Company Dreadnought too. And they had I'm pretty sure it was the Blood Angels that you could do an entire dreadnought army.
Maybe. I don't know. You've been playing far longer than me.
Yes, I remember back in the day where you got a free.
That wasn't a shot. Don't even take it.
No. I legitimately remember back in the day whenever you got the Assassin's Codex for free in the damn it, White Dwarf. It was actually a polybagged White Dwarf, and inside the White Dwarf was a copy of the the Assassin's Codex.
They still do that, kind of.
No, but it was free with the White Dwarf.
Yeah, it's printed with they've done.
Oh, no. This was a separate codex, like an actual codex, but it was only like 6 pages long, 10 pages long, and it had the glossy cover just like the rest of the codexes, and it wasn't like okay, so back
a part of the magazine.
Yeah, it was its own separate little book.
Gotcha.
Okay. If you go to eBay and you look up like 3rd edition Assassin's Codex, you'll probably pull it up. No, one thing I remember, and I think they do it now. They used to have what was called chapter approved.
Yeah.
And it was official rules.
Correct.
It was official rules that are playable and everything else. And there was a long time. There was a lot of stuff that came out as chapter approved. And I think Grey Knights were originally chapter approved. They did not have their own army. It was basically there was a squad of 10 Terminators that you could add on to your army, and it was like 700 points. It was something freaking ridiculous for one squad. But these things were like what the Custodes are now. They were Mr. Beast, Mr. Badass. And I do like Speed Freaks. I think there was an Orc army that was chapter approved, and then I believe the Dreadnought army. It was Blood Angels, but it was also chapter approved on how to play it. But back in the day, and I really wish they would do this again, we used to have what was called VDR, and it was this whole fucking rule subset, and it came out originally as a chapter approved, but it stood for Vehicle Design Rule, and it had essentially the rules on how to design everything. Like,
Yeah.
it had how to figure out the point cost on a Gatling long-barreled las cannon, as an example, and then how to sculpt it and how to represent it on a model. Basically, 3 las cannon barrels, they have to be longer than normal, and all of that jazz. But yeah, so it was basically build your own damn vehicles, and it would give you the formula on how to figure out how many points. You could have shit with, I kid you not, 50 fucking bolters on, which I think was part of the reason that it ended up going away, because it was builds like that were broken. But you could build.
They still do. They still do chapter approves, and so and the listeners will have to bear with us. You have the older rules in your noggin still, and I've been in it in your absence, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
So they do still do the chapter approves. What they use them for now, kids, is more or less to fix broken items in the game, almost like a big FAQ. And they do a big FAQ on top of that as well. But
which, like I said earlier, just came out. So there's a whole bunch of rules, point adjustments, and all that stuff that just came out.
But they do the chapter approves yearly. It'll be a lot of points updates if they've noticed that the min-maxers. And again, this is one of the reasons why I actually do like Games Workshop and the systems that they run, is if they realize that this army's being min-maxed because this unit is, through Math Hammer, better than everything else, and they're seeing a lot of it in a tournament, they'll hit that with the Nerf bat real quick. So
that's actually fairly new. That's not how they used to be. It was basically they're more into the living codexes now versus this deal with it until we print a new codex bullshit.
Correct. And they're trying to go digital with it all. They've got their app out now, which I've played with a little bit. I have far from truly gone into it, and I think that if the listeners end up liking hearing me and you talk Warhammer, I think that could be another big thing that we could talk about in another episode. But what the chapter approves now, for the most part, is to fix problems. They've done a couple codex releases, smaller codex releases, in the chapter approves as well.
Sisters were originally a chapter approved.
Correct. Sisters were. And there was another one that...
Gene Stealer cults were originally a chapter approved.
Yeah, that was the other one I was trying to think of. Gene Stealer cults.
Yeah, there's a lot of armies. Death Watch were originally a chapter approved.
Correct. They were. I do know my Death Watch history.
A lot of stuff that's been an army recently were actually started their life off as a chapter. It's kind of their testing ground. They're like, hey, let's see if people actually, and sometimes it takes them a decade to finally release models, a la Sisters.
Well, and I think Sisters, for the most part, while there was a huge calling for them, I think it was one of those things where I think they were having a hard time fleshing it out, and they were having a hard time putting it all together, making it a runnable force.
No, that's not actually why it took forever for that army. Because you have to remember, that was a second edition army. That actually, that existed as a codex in second edition. I know this. No, the reason that they gave, at least, was they could not... Okay, so this was back in the day when they liked modular pieces, and like Space Marines, it was very kit bashable because they were very modular. They were trying to do that with Sisters, and they were trying to make them modular, but at the same token, they were having a problem with their road. GW has since then changed its design philosophy. They're not so much about modularity as they are cool-looking models. Like
dynamic posing.
Right. It's really difficult to custom pose the newer stuff. And for a kit basher, that can be a problem. If you're just cool with having like 5 or 6 different... They typically have like 5 or 6 different poses. So if your dudes are on the table, there's enough variety that it's not like they're all statues or shit like that. But when they finally went to the new design philosophy of not giving a rat's shit about modularity and customization. Then at that point, they did the sisters because while the poses are not stationary, they're not super, they don't have to worry about the modularity of it.
Correct.
So that was about the time. And it was the reason they always gave was they couldn't get everything to line up properly with the robes for the modularity, yada, yada, yada. And when they finally changed it to make it where they just build the damn models and they don't give a damn, then that's when they finally were like, hey, now we can release Sister. Only been asking for 20 years, but yeah, better late than never.
Well, they still don't really have a whole lot of support for them. Honestly, there's no start collecting, which I will say for a lot of these quote unquote chapter approved armies, there's not start collectings for them. Like there's no start collectings for the Grey Knights. There's not a start collecting for Sisters or Custodes. There was another Gene Stealer cults. I don't think they have a start collecting yet. Or if they do,
they absolutely do. I saw it today.
Okay. Well, there you go then.
Yeah, I saw it today at the key.
So I don't know. That would be one thing. Again, going back to new players, I do tend to agree with you on that. The start collecting value is hard to pass up, especially for a new player. It's a very easy way to get a decent sized force that's got a little bit of everything in it that you'll need and not break the bank. So that would be one thing to keep in mind, I guess.
But yeah, and it's not like you said, not every army has a start collecting, but a good portion of them do. So they're getting better at them too. After they got rid of the old CEO, he was the person I think that it was the biggest detriment to the company was that guy. He really was not. He didn't understand the concept that if you please the player, then more money will come in. He was focused way too much just on pure profits and not enough on the players. And as soon as a new person who was very player oriented took over, their profits freaking skyrocketed. Like when the new
and not just that, but they put so much focus on the box games, which by box games I mean your Kill Team, Blood Bowl, Warcry.
Those were all
Necromundas.
Those were all done on purpose, though.
Oh, I know.
And that was the CFO, the new dude, who really did a focus on those. And
I know.
And it needed to happen. That's the thing, because Cool Mini and a couple other companies out there really changed the landscape of tabletop war games. And people were looking for tabletop war games in a box, which is what I alluded to earlier. So GW really had to, that you had stuff like Arcadia Quest and all those games that were doing, and Zombicide, which were doing really, really well, making lots of money. And GW kind of looked at that and was like, well, how do we do this? And the thing I love about their armies in a box, or their games in a box, with some exceptions, and the exceptions are like Blood Bowl and Necromunda and stuff like that, they all tie into their core game. Like I can go buy Kill Team, which I have behind me, and I start buying models for it, and those models will carry over into Warhammer 40K.
Well, and I would even make the argument for Necromunda. And I would say this to players that want something a little more unique, that a lot of those models can be brought over as well. If you think that I could take a Necromunda game and use it as Chaos Cultists for my Chaos Space Marines?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no.
Well, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. But for most of... And I only speak from personal experience, so take that with a grain of salt. For most of the community that I've seen and I've dealt with, and the people that I tend to gravitate towards as friends and fellow players, if I were to pull out 30 Necromunda guys and say, hey, I'm playing these as Chaos Cultists, Larry, I know for a fact you wouldn't bat an eye as long as they had paint on them.
That's true. It's not that some of them couldn't be adopted over. Like, yeah, you could absolutely do Chaos Cults. You could also do Gene Stealer cults. But if you wanted, and you could probably do a couple guard units too.
Hard. Yeah.
But if you wanted to play Arbites, as an example, those really don't have an equivalent over into 40K. Not in the greater scheme of things. Now, I would love a freaking Arbite army, a freaking lion. It would be amazing. But it isn't a thing right now. And that's fine. It's just as long as you know what you're getting into. And here's the one thing that GW did right. They broadened their horizons. Like, back in the day, they were a large format tabletop war game, and that was it. There wasn't any, let's do a skirmish game, or let's do this, or let's do that. But then their biggest competitor, which isn't really a competitor anymore, came out, and they did skirmish battles. And they were very popular because they did skirmish battles. So,
well, and that would be the other thing that I would definitely say to the new players: don't buy your first army and get a 500 point or 1,000 point army and go into the game store or go over to your buddy's house and think that you're going to play for half an hour.
Yeah, there's definitely a time investment when it comes to this game. Even the smaller game, there's still a time investment. Now, the smaller games are not as bad. Say, like, if you're buying, at a minimum, I would say be ready to spend 2 hours, and that's no matter what you're getting into. Kill Team or any of that stuff, you're still looking at a couple hours.
After, because you got to think, I mean, you're setting up a table, you're doing all, I mean, I think for my first game, it was 1,000 point game that I played with just somebody from one of the local Facebook groups. And I think it was 2.5 hours, basically from shaking his hand at the door to packing up everything at the end of it.
And that's still fairly quick. I remember 4 or 5, and they've streamlined the rules a lot. I remember 40K kicking. You were looking at 3 to 6 hours for a good sized game, and that was
which I wouldn't be opposed to that at this point in time in life. But like I said, it's a time investment that you got to know you're getting ready to make.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. But yeah, and you can also, that's another thing. That's something we didn't bring up. It's like, how much time do you have to play games? And you can look at the various games that are out there and be like, okay, this game on average takes way too long, but I can get into Blood Bowl because those games take 45 minutes on average, and less if you got a couple players who know what the hell they're doing. And that's something you need to look at as well whenever you're getting into this stuff, is how long does a game take to play? There's the time investment on top of everything else, because these tabletop war games are not short. Anybody who's ever played Risk, Risk takes a hot minute to play. And there's Warhammer 40K Risk. So it's one of those. Also look at the time investment, because these aren't super short type deals. Some of them take a while.
Absolutely.
I have no idea what time it is, and oh shit, it's midnight. I think we should probably start wrapping this up.
All right. I've got no final thoughts, bud.
Yeah.
I think we hit on all the big topics.
All right. So
to the listeners out there, let us know what you thought of this episode. Let us know if this is the kind of midnight ramblings that you would like to continue to hear.
This is probably still what you're going to get, because this is stuff that we're doing right now. And if you want us to talk to you, which you said you do, this is kind of what you're going to get, which is fine, because eventually we're going to start painting this stuff and start talking. I'm just building it right now. And the tools that I'm using.
And if you think next weekend I'm not going to be out, because Anne's got to work all weekend next weekend. So, yeah, if you're in town next weekend, I'll be up there. I'll have a bunch of stuff to base coat.
My airbrush, make sure it's running. I was shooting air out of it, but I'm not 100% sure it'll shoot anything else out of it. Yeah, sure. Wouldn't be a problem. But, all right, so you can find us at models-workshop.com. If you're listening to the podcast, awesome. You can find it pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. You can also find me on Twitter and on the good old Instagrams, and that's at both of those /MWH podcast. You can find us on Facebook at The Models Workshop. And we also have a group, and we're actually almost right there at 1,000 members. So you go there. And you can find us on, of course, TikTok. And that's, for me, it's at Models Workshop. And you can find Jay
at Noble Pursuits. Or
And-
you can find my company on Facebook at Facebook.com/In Noble Pursuits.
Now, is that N as in IN or N as in N, the letter?
N is an IN.
All right, cool. But yeah, so there's where you find us. If you want a lot more content of us, TikTok's kind of the way to do it, because I'll think of a tip and I'll be like, ooh, I'm going to do a video on it. And then I kind of base everything else around that. Like, oh, I'm going to do a series on glue, and then eventually I'm going to work a script and do it I'll gather all the different supplies up, and I'll do a actual YouTube video on it, which is youtube.com/models workshop. All right, cool. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, we're back. So, until next time, talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Bye.